Welcome to our webinar, the Finance Stack in Scale-Up. So when to go all in on a NetSuite with Cooper Parry and Rsult. So quick hello from me. I'm Tom, Associate Partner in the Tech and High Growth team at Cooper Parry. We help and support early stage to late stage tech businesses and all things sort of finance partner related in the early stage. So looking after reporting, compliance and general support around fundraising, R&D, sort of annual accounts and advisory needs as companies come across them as they're scaling. We've been in business as a team at Cooper Parry now for 4 years, having started the team through COVID. There's about 120 of us now, sort of 40 or so on the earlier stage side and about the rest on the late stage side, supporting companies through their growth. So the idea is that we help early stage businesses with the support they need to scale, and then we switch our focus to sort of helping them to set up internal finance teams, to then working with more of the finance team as our contact point going forward to help them with the rest of their journey as they go through the world of auditing and international tax complications and diligence events and all that kind of good stuff. So it's a pleasure to speak to you all today.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick. I'm a senior manager in the Cooper Parry Tech and High Growth team, so work alongside Tom. I lead the strategic finance department, so we act as a bridge between the early stage clients who will take your typical outsourcing services such as management accounts, payroll, VAT, and the later stage clients which are getting audited and are growing to beyond the startup size. And we provide financial modeling, cash flow forecasting, scenario planning type services, process reviews, including software reviews and assistance with software implementation, and some CFO advisory support. So probably about 95% of our clients have started off on Xero. Some of them have moved to NetSuite over the last few years, and we've helped them on that journey. And it's a question that comes up pretty much every month with one of our clients, like when should we move from Xero? So hopefully what we go through today will give everyone a bit of an idea of when is the right time. Mike.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Mike. I represent a company called Rsult, who are a NetSuite practice. I've spent the last 15 plus years helping businesses evaluate whether NetSuite's right for their business, and also to get the best value from NetSuite on a long-term basis, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit in today's session. My career started off with NetSuite directly for a couple of years. Then I moved to a NetSuite partner, which ultimately became part of RSM, an accounting firm that many of us will probably be familiar with. And then just over 2 years ago, I joined Rsult.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, just to reiterate the title, so we're going to go thinking about the finance stack in scale-ups and when to go all in on NetSuite and sort of ERP systems. Despite the title, the session isn't purely focused on sort of finance, the ERP tech and the product itself, but also thinking about, as with any sort of good sort of finance partner, how we work together collectively, sort of with a partner supporting and helping and being there alongside to help think about things that may unfold as your journey rolls out, whether you're using whether you're already using an ERP or whether you're thinking about rolling one out. It's all about thinking about that sort of partner support and someone being there alongside to help with issues and help with growth opportunities and really help to get the most out of it, because as most of us would have known if we've looked at it, it's more than just moving to a new software. It really is about a new relationship and a new set of resources that we're going to be unlocking as a finance team when we start to implement something like this. So really the focus of today is to think about lots of different considerations around sort of when the right time is, what the benefits are, but also thinking about what successful implementation looks like, and thinking and having a conversation really about some of those points and how to think about them in the context of it being a partnership and having a support partner with you to help you sort of go through those growing points together really. So that's the aim of today. We're going to have a conversation really about it, just sort of talk amongst ourselves on a lot of these points, just to help share some experiences and some of our thoughts and value. And then I said if we've got some good questions at the end, then we'll focus specifically on particular situations. So without further ado, let's think about what are the benefits of an ERP system. So there's obviously many. to think about and to list. But I think if we focus on a few, I think if we like to look at things with an end goal in mind, and I think moving away from a simpler, lighter, well-placed software solution in the early days, which is key for getting things up and running, getting things off the ground, quickly manoeuvring, quickly sort of developing things as you push forward as a finance team and as a business. There's obviously benefits to moving across to something that's far more robust. So if we think about end state and what successful companies do when they exit, sort of Mike, the benefits there are that's going to be evidently more achievable when they're at the later stage, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think, to start with, businesses might want to stay very, very agile, and later on introduce more structure, and have better financial reporting. Also try and reduce the number of systems. Everything when you start a business, I think, is you keep things cheap. You've got manual workarounds. You might be working out of spreadsheets, but that doesn't scale very well. But it keeps the cost down. It enables you to work out what are your requirements. But gradually, I think you have to migrate towards a point where you might be thinking about attracting investment. There might be a plan to IPO at some point, and you want to be investable. You want to be safe, and you want to have a platform for growth. And I think those are the benefits that an ERP system brings you. It's that kind of combination, really, of having structure, but at the same time, a system that's flexible enough that you can tailor it, that you can add to it, that it's modular. It's not just a fixed point product that just does one thing.
Absolutely, because more than half of the tech IPOs over the last decade have run with NetSuite, haven't they, as an example, which is obviously gearing up. It's a point around processes and developing a finance system to grow with you as a business, isn't it, and to implement, sort of help you with business process development and change as well as your scaling, because it's far easier with a tool like NetSuite to start implementing those processes and systems internally.
Yeah, spot on. That's a good stat, and it's something worth googling. Is to make it. How many companies that do IPO are running on NetSuite or other ERP systems? Usually they are. By then, they're organisations that have structure, particularly if they're expanding. So if you're opening up businesses in different countries, you don't really want to have multiple instances of an accounting solution, and in each country there might be a different accounting solution of choice in those particular regions, and then it becomes a nightmare to consolidate. So an ERP system gives you the benefit of really having a single view of that international footprint.
Yeah, I think from our client's perspective, that's probably the first thing that they highlighted is why they want to move to an ERP. It's that they're trying to do consolidations. It's all very manual. They don't have a solid one single truth source of data anywhere that they can rely on. They've got multiple spreadsheets. So that's definitely, I think, what we see as the first thing that people highlight when they're thinking about an ERP.
I like the term hairballs, isn't it? It's that kind of interlocking matrix of various different add-ons and tools that businesses are using as they're scaling. And I think as you're defining the business and growing and deciding what you need and how the business is going to work and operate, whether that's internally, customer facing, through a sales pipeline, through reporting tools, through processes internally, as you're testing that and as you're gauging that human behavior and that assumption, obviously it's the best thing to do is to bring in an add-on that does that and plug it in and make sure that the environment is set up to allow you to achieve what you're trying to achieve as a business. But when you're talking there about overseas as well, like there's going to be processes and systems and tools for other countries that are more appropriate to be using, and then you end up with this knitted web of different instances of accounting software with different tools, which as you're growing is important because you're still proving that point. But then when you hit a certain point of scale, isn't it, it's that becomes difficult to manage because they've all got, you need to be a champion in all of them. A lot of the tools that are being used are actually startups as well, so there's always that risk that they might not be around in 6 months' time or a year. So it's leaning into what works well as you're growing, isn't it? And then when you've realised that things are working, then it's thinking about, right, what's a better way, a more efficient way of doing this?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I agree with you. The hairball analogy is a really good one. In fact, it's a shame we're not using PowerPoint because I think it's a nice way of illustrating the benefits of an ERP. It's not just a finance system. It can potentially do other things for other departments as well. And I think when you move from that startup to that scale up business, actually consolidating everything into a common platform makes sense. It might not always make sense. There might become a future where the business is really, really grown, and then individual departments become quite big and they need specialist and best of breed products to do things like, I don't know, accounts payable or HR very, very well, rather than doing it generally okay, which is the way an ERP system might do it. But to go through that growth transition from being that startup to being that scale up mid-tier business, I think the ERP can add a lot of value to reducing that web of different systems that you're trying to knit together. And as you quite rightly said, Tom, the multi-company hairball of hairballs is a nightmare. That just it's a blocker. It stops you from scaling.
Yeah, I think Xero eventually does just become a blocker at a certain point in time anyway, probably. As companies get more complicated, they might start using just summary revenue data, for example, in Xero, and then you actually lose the ability to see the detailed granular view of what's happening with revenue. And then I've got another system again on top of Xero and all your other add-ons that you're using actually for the revenue and margin reporting and things. So that's another thing that we see quite often with our clients, that is a reason why they're looking away from Xero.
And you're relying on all of the softwares all being closed at the same time, so they consolidate, and the timing issue of juggling all the different softwares together. And it's sort of, yeah, it's elegantly moving forward from that situation, isn't it? Where it's necessary in the early days, but then it gets to a point where you think, right, things need to sharpen up a little bit now, and we feel like we're at the right point. So sort of thinking about that right time to switch across to an ERP, I guess sort of when we deliver sessions like this and when we're working with our clients, it comes up a lot in terms of when the right time to switch is. I think we've alluded to a little bit of that with the growth that businesses are going through, and when they feel the creaking. And for me, it's definitely the feeling, I think, is a big part of it, actually, because you're kind of going along with a lot of feels as you're growing and scaling your business, and you feel, you can tell when that process feels less agile and helpful in the early days. It starts to feel a little bit more laborious and painful to work with, and you start to challenge some of the various tools. And like you said, Nick, there, the reporting and being able to drill down into things starts to create more, it sometimes can create more questions than it does answers, because you start to get to that point where it feels like it's becoming a little bit of a blocker as you scale. It's looking for a solution to sort of help with that, isn't it?
Yeah, it creates more problems, because then you've got to start trying to reconcile data between different systems to the accounts to make sure they are accurate, and it just causes more problems than being helpful as it's meant to be.
Yeah, I think it's having it defined as a sort of platform for growth being needed is sort of, yeah, the real right time to switch. And it's sort of when you've hit those limits, like you said, Nick, about of Xero and what you feel like it's capable of. Obviously, Xero is very adaptable and malleable in some instances, but there is a time when the point is everyone's going to have their own sort of case by case example of when they hit this limit where it starts to feel uncomfortable to be using the spread of tools that everyone's got available to them. And it's really at that point where everyone hits that at different times, isn't it, where they feel, right, we've got to start building for the next stage now, which is the next phase, 18 months, 2 years out.
Yeah. And then also, I think another key point is just the lack of controls that Xero has. It becomes an issue as you're growing and you're starting to get towards audit size. You're going through due diligence events. People are looking back at data and it's still being changed by somebody. There's just a lot of scope for things to crop up there, and it's obviously really helpful when you're a small startup and you know things need to be flexible. But as you get into the scale up size and need to be a bit more professional, have those controls in place, again, Xero starts to lack that.
Absolutely. We spoke about we caught up recently, Mike, about the sort of empowering finance and accounting, didn't we, and sort of it being a tool to empower that function.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not just businesses that are scaling up, that are startup, but also legacy businesses that are maybe running a traditional on-premise system or a traditional old accounting system, whether it's Pegasus or an old Sage product or whatever. And those finance teams are kind of relying on everybody else to tell them what's already happened, and then it's ending up in the finance system. And Xero, I guess in that world, it's a little bit unless you've got it like integrated to front office systems and things. The finance team really want to be more at the table, helping to innovate in the business and having more a strategic view. and you want more real-time data at that point. And that really does create a kind of compelling case for ERP at that point, I think, is bringing finance into the equation to help drive the business forward rather than just being a bookkeeper and everything's past tense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I guess you could sum it up as maturity across all levels, couldn't you? It's kind of maturing the system, as you said, with other mature systems, but then if they're feeling like a blocker because of the way they work, because it's sort of old, and it's a chance to just think about a new approach. And the way the finance team will be evolving as a business scales by thinking about extra controls, extra processes, extra sort of ways of thinking about doing things that have got a bit more rigor to them. It works well to start to bake those into discussions around how can the software support that, and how does it all sort of feed together so that audit trail and that drill down is there so we can see everything in the same place. And I think it's super helpful to know that robust sort of approach and the rigor around the finance controls and processes is something to sort of grow into as well. Obviously, those things will be happening with the tools, but having it all in one place with a little bit more of an oversight holistically through one tool, one environment is obviously is valuable.
Yeah, I think we get a lot of feedback that it's a big leap to move from something like Xero to something like a NetSuite system. And people always ask this question, when is the right time to move? Why do some people, and also, we see different businesses moving from Xero to NetSuite at different times, at different stages of growth. It is such a big difference in terms of cost, in terms of the thought that needs to go into the implementation process. People quite often ask us, what's the in-between solution between NetSuite and Xero? Because we kind of feel that we're there. We're stretching the limits of this kind of startup tech stack, but we don't feel that we're ready to invest in that kind of big ERP project yet. What do we do? And do you get those kind of customers coming to you a lot asking for your advice at Cooper Parry?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Tom, do you want to go on?
No, you crack on.
Yeah, I think that's like a massive point, as you say. Like, companies feel like they are outgrowing Xero for various reasons, but they still might just have a small finance team, and it's a difficult point and question to answer. Do we have the internal resource to dedicate to the NetSuite implementation to make sure that it's going to happen effectively? Potentially no. There's potentially, if there's only 2 or 3 people in the finance team, going to be more important things that they need to be looking at. And then it is difficult. I think you've mentioned, Mike, on one of our chats that often you suggest going for the bare minimum NetSuite implementation on day one and then slowly scaling that up over the time as the team grows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think just to there isn't to go back to that question, is there a middle of the road solution? I haven't found one. And the tech stack we quite often see is Xero plus Dext plus. There's all sorts of bolt-ons, and it just starts to feel like that kind of small business hairball, really. And it gets to a point where the next most obvious migration path is NetSuite. But you're quite right, Nick. The secret then is, how do you make that as small a step as possible, but still take that step from that kind of world of Xero to that world of NetSuite? And I think that's the key, really, is to keep it as simple as it possibly can be. And it's not like the old days when you were investing in an ERP or an MRP. It was only for really big corporate enterprise businesses. These days, ERP has made itself relevant to the mid-market, to scale up businesses by creating kind of pre-built workflows, pre-built functionality. So it's out of the box as an ERP could possibly be. Okay, it's still weeks and months of implementation potentially, but it's still a much bigger price tag than a small business accounting system. But it's possible if you really keep it simple, as long as you're organized and you've got structure around the way that you approach the project.
Yeah, it's really that end state view, isn't it? Thinking what you're going to need, because things grow and move forward quickly. Like, what are you going to need down the line in terms of your structure and your setup, and making sure that you're holding on to things as they are as long as possible for you to make sure that you've made that right choice to jump to that. I wouldn't say end state, but that kind of the structure and the environment you want to have in sort of 18 months, 2 years, 3 years time, because you know what you're trying to achieve as a business. And I think the amount of time and effort, not just money, obviously, but in terms of resources on the company's end, who are looking at this, it's getting the right strategic timing to jump from A to B and make sure that you've made the right choice to do that at the right time is really going to be an important one, because if you do it a couple of times, it's really going to drain. It's going to take your attention away from other things which are probably far more important than making the decision to go from an earlier stage solution to more of a later stage solution. And as we all know, with sort of growing businesses and thinking about cash flow and funding and building the team and focusing on other areas, it's not the sort of thing you want to be doing every couple of years. So thinking about making sure the environment you currently got, if you're in a more of a startup setup, is what can we do to long this out as much as we possibly can to make sure it's still working and comfortable for us to make that choice to then jump in and set things up as we need to, and make sure that it's as easy as possible to transition from A to B, and then we're set up then, even if it is as a bare minimum, to grow and push forward for the next few years, knowing that we're in a good position. We don't have to think about it again.
Yeah, and exactly. I think our clients as well, sort of, who have implemented it at the smaller scale, who have a small finance team, in 2 years' time, they might have tripled revenue, tripled headcount, and suddenly have a 6 or 7 person finance team. And by that point, they can get all of the benefits that NetSuite can offer, and have already got the basics implemented and don't need to go through a full all singing, all dancing implementation from zero at that point, when it's a bit more painful as well.
Yeah, like with anything, it's proving getting the behavior right in the team and how the business works in a sort of MVP type fashion with the earlier tech stack before you go all in and sort of say, right, this is how the business is operating. And we made that point earlier, but it's an important one to think about in terms of some people deciding to move and others not, and whether they really need to sort of think about an ERP. I guess there's a bit around the economics, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's the first thing is it affordable? You know, and I generally have in my mind, when I get approached by a business who's sub 5 million turnover, I'm a little bit nervous.
Yeah.
Unless of course they are of a certain, you know, let's say that they've got a bunch of investment behind them, or they're a spin-off from a larger entity, and you know, they're backed by that entity, or they've exited from a previous business and they're sitting on a pile of cash or something. And if the growth confidence is there, if they know that really they might look like a sub 5 million business, but they're about to hit 20 million because they're really confident in their growth model, then that's fine. You know, that go for gold, because you don't want to have to grow on small business systems and then get really complicated and then create a nightmare of an ERP migration. If you can do it early, even when you're pre-revenue, then you're in a really very fortunate situation. But the majority of businesses, you know, they need to prove the model, grow organically, get to the point where they're 5 million plus, and then they're growing really into that space where they can afford an ERP system, and they probably need one.
Absolutely. I mean, we sort of we've discussed sort of readiness and resourcing and the requirements it takes to implement one. I think we're going to touch on this a bit later on, sort of in 10 minutes or so, but just having an environment within your business which is ready to move across to a new ERP system is another important point, and just making sure that it's not going to detract too much from the business as usual, and it's going to help add value along the way. And we're going to touch a bit more on sort of the resourcing side of things and how it works from an implementation in a little bit. But I think just thinking about sort of a business's situation, like if a company is a single entity, single country, growing steadily with good processes in place, it's not really, even if they hit sort of 5 million turnover, it's not something that we really need to worry about or consider at that point, because it's the benefits of having some of the features are just not going to be worth it at that point, really, are they?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you've got a one country, one entity business, and finance is really not complicated, maybe the drivers and, you know, the desire to invest in technology might be driven by the interface with the customer, for example. You know, that's where you should invest in technology, is to improve that experience, customer experience, to drive growth. Or it might be the operational or logistical part of the business, which is more important. You know, the way the product or the service is managed, it's more important to drive innovation in that area rather than into finance and ERP. So you might get away without investing in an ERP until you're, I don't know, a 50 to 100 million turnover business. And then, of course, at that point, if you're still running on Xero or Pegasus Opera or Sage 50, it doesn't feel
Yeah. And the niche nick is a big one, isn't it, that we see?
Yeah, some entities are obviously way simpler than others, like e-commerce businesses who start dealing in stock in multiple locations and things like that are obviously going to be looking for an ERP a lot quicker than some other types of businesses. We also work with some fintechs, which have quite complicated, like revenue accounting, which has to happen outside of Xero just because of the complexities. And Mike, NetSuite has a lot more flexibility in terms of the APIs and creating bespoke workflows and things, doesn't it, which lends itself to that sort of business.
Yeah, absolutely. There's obviously a lot more flexibility in NetSuite to customize, integrate with other systems, but I would just be careful. You know, we're not encouraging people to do that in the first phase. It's nice to know that you're moving to a platform that has those capabilities, but wherever possible, people should adopt kind of leading practices and standard features. But of course, NetSuite has a really good API. There's a lot of standard connectors out there that people have put together, as well as the ability to create completely custom integrations to things.
Obviously, a major consideration is cost. We've sort of spoken about it a little bit. I think the way to view it is that kind of total cost of ownership, isn't it? It's thinking about the package and how it works for you as a business, and thinking about the sort of the other costs that may be comparable and that kind of thing. So what do you say when people ask you that, Mike?
Well, you know, it's a good question. We obviously, if people want to know what the cost of NetSuite is, that does depend on requirements. It depends on, you know, what functions people are consuming, how many users we need to think about. You know, obviously we're talking tens of thousands, normally six-figure numbers in the first year when you add it all together. But if you ask most traditional ERPs what they cost, they might give you a much lower number than that. But the reality is, in the NetSuite world, is there's no hiding place. So everything's baked into that subscription fee. So NetSuite automatically upgrades, for example, every year. So you're benefiting from all of that tech stack, the data centers, the automatic upgrades. Whereas with the other, maybe more traditional ERP providers, you know, what benefit are they baking into that subscription fee? You know, look at Microsoft. You know, how many times have they bought a product and then sweated it out and then tried to re-platform it? Look at Sage. They're more of an acquisition brand rather than an ERP brand, so to speak. Whereas NetSuite has had a fairly consistent investment into innovation, product development every year. It's the same product, still the same product, and it was always born in the internet, designed to be delivered as a service in the cloud. So you get a lot of value. And people quite often get put off by the price tag. But it's easy, I think, with NetSuite to understand total cost of ownership than it is with the other products. You have to ask those other vendors, well, how much does an upgrade cost, and what's the future of this product? Because I've seen you've shelved a load of previous ERPs that you've bought, and you know. But with NetSuite, I think you get more confidence generally that you can assess what the total cost of the ownership is going to be. And also, NetSuite have implemented something like 40,000 customers across the partner ecosystem, across NetSuite doing implementations themselves. And all of that intelligence in that single product gives them a lot of benchmarking data to work with, which means that they can now offer this thing called a value assessment, which is basically an ROI calc that they can work with a customer to deliver based on benchmarking data from 40,000 odd implementations. So you can get a lot of really compelling kind of business cases built with the help of NetSuite and partners to understand really what the true cost of ownership is, what the potential return on investment is, to help you kind of build a business case for making that investment into an ERP.
Absolutely. I think just one more point on sort of thinking about why or not. I think timing around events that are happening to the business. So thinking about if you're going through a fundraising process, so you're gearing up for an exit, there's going to be some material commercial drivers for you to be focusing on and to be thinking about sort of getting through before sort of trying to alongside think about implementation. And what I would say is make sure you've got a clear pathway. So maybe post a fundraising event, or when you've got a bit of a window, if you're gearing up for an exit and you know you want to be sort of going out to tender in a few years' time because you've got you know what you need to achieve and the metrics you're trying to go for. If moving to a new ERP system is going to help you and give you more robust data to enable you to do that and to improve processes, give you some more time to focus on some of the commercial areas, then it's definitely just get the timing right, because the last thing you want to be doing is going through a a 12-month DD process on an exit event, speaking to a couple of potential acquirers, or going through a fundraising event for 3 or 4 months when you're knee deep in data, and then trying to alongside make sure you've got everything planned in. So it's just picking your time. And I don't think that if there's something material going on, let that ride out, because you know the legacy system, you know what you're working with, you know where the data is. Like, get that key event over the line, and then start thinking about next steps if needed. I think that's an important one as well. Cool, excellent. I think think about, we sort of talked about the benefits. We've talked about sort of why you would, why you wouldn't, and sort of certain businesses fitting the need. In terms of sort of a successful implementation and the considerations on avoiding things that might not go so well. I think we've sort of been catching up over our sort of relationship in the past, haven't we? It comes to the sort of sum of a bunch of P's, doesn't it? There's you've got a nice mantra around the 5 P's, Mike, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just it kind of helps to structure it this way, because it reminds me what the best advice is I've ever given, and it kind of helps people absorb the advice. But if I could just read them off my sheet, so it's planning is the first thing, and under that, really generally, you've got people, processes, priorities, partner, and product. So there's a lot of P's to talk about there, but if you get those things right, then in the main, you can avoid all of the ERP nightmares that you've read about. And there's plenty of them, poorly managed scope, trying to build a Death Star, not having the right project team to start with and having to switch those people out, and the project takes forever. Having a really difficult relationship between the implementation team and your own team. There's a whole bunch of different, obviously selecting the wrong product is in there, and we're having this discussion in the context of, for the majority of the audience here, they're going to be thinking of the context of moving from Xero to NetSuite. So I don't think we need to really dwell on that point too much. And I think, what we tried to stress this at the start, I don't know if people picked up on it, is actually it's the soft stuff that's more important here. It's more about people, it's more about partnerships. And it's more about understanding your own processes and requirements that's really fundamental to making this transition from being a startup running on something like Xero to scaling up and running on an ERP system. Those things are far more important than going out shopping for a product.
Absolutely. And in terms of the need on the company side, when they're going through an implementation, we've got various roles, haven't we, that need to be sort of covered off. There needs to be a lead, there needs to be a sponsor, there needs to be various individuals taking care of certain roles as this is rolling through. So it's a project that obviously needs people's full attention, and they need to be mapped into the right places, don't they? And need to make sure there's continuity Absolutely. There.
Yeah, the people are so fundamental to this. If you're a very small business and you're planning to implement a fairly limited scope, you might only need 2 or 3 key people involved in that project, and it actually might be led by a single individual who's got the wherewithal to work with the ERP provider and or partner and implement ultimately a fairly straightforward financial management system, but not in the small business application, but in the ERP application. And that person knows when to call on help from the people around them. Those could be the business process owners or key business users or whatever you want to call them. I think a strong project sponsor to support that individual is really, really key as well, because there could still be decisions to make around new requirements that come to light, or something that wasn't identified during the requirement, when you're identifying requirements. So yeah, I would certainly think, who's going to be leading the project, who's our project lead, who's going to be the project sponsor that's not involved in the day-to-day but is able to make those key decisions and resolve conflicts, and then who are the wider team that's going to support that project lead, and maybe it's different departmental leads.
Absolutely. And I like the point you said earlier about the phasing, because Nick, we see this, don't we, in terms of our clients scaling and having a good array of finance processes and solutions systems there. And I think it's sort of like it's thinking about that first phase as, let's get that working before thinking about changing business processes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like a lot of the companies that we work with on the startup to scale up journey, they might be thinking about NetSuite potentially, but really they've got a complete lack of processes anyway internally, and there needs to be a bit of a planning exercise in advance of that to think, well, what are the processes we have in place now? Where do we need to make improvements over the next 6 to 12 months? Let's get them in place and make sure we have actual processes that we can then start to use to replicate it into the NetSuite environment, and that will make the process a lot easier than trying to create something and implement NetSuite at the same time, because the like culture is not there essentially to operate in such a professional, controlled, driven manner.
Yeah, changing behavior is hard at the best of times, right? And it's
Yeah.
trying to force behavioral change with new processes alongside an implementation is going to be tricky. So yeah, I think we would recommend thinking about replacing what you've got like for like in terms of how the business is operating, and then think, right, now we've got this functionality and ability to be doing ABC over the next 3, 6, 9 months in terms of business process change. Let's start to think about that as projects to sharpen up in certain areas. Otherwise, trying to do both things at the same time to then fit all the features in that you want out of the ERP system, it's going to be difficult. So I think land it, mirror what you've got, and then start to build the processes into that as you go forward, isn't it?
I think from our experience too, we've worked with quite a lot of clients who have implemented NetSuite. The person who's implemented it may have left, and like they're left with a solution that they don't really know how to use or how to grow and how to improve over time. And I think, Mike, we've talked about the fact that having a partner to work alongside and go on that journey with you is critical to the success of NetSuite. And that's what you guys try to provide your clients.
Yeah, that's right. And I think partnerships, NetSuite partners, are the same as any other ERP partner, and any kind of professional services firm in general. It's a shifting landscape, because a partner is only really as good as the people that it currently has. It's only as good as the CVs, the experience, the resource availability that it has, etc. So I think it's really important that people actually set out to evaluate partners carefully. They look at the CVs of the project team that they're going to be working with. I think that's really key. References is really important as well. I mean, if for example, you're speaking to a partner and it takes them a month to introduce you to any customers, then maybe there could be a concern there. If well, I'm quite happy that we're in a very fortunate position. Most of our customers, jump at the chance to jump on a call with a prospective customer and talk about us, which is really, we're very fortunate at the moment. But if that feels like you're struggling to get access to a conversation with an existing customer, that might be a red flag. So yeah, I think that's really quite key. And also understanding what kind of journey you're going to have with that partner. I mean, if you set out to buy a product, right, you could end up speaking to the sales guy who's selling that product. They might be only motivated by winning that particular piece of business, and then you feel that transition when you've made, you purchased the ERP system, and then you're dealing with a whole new team of people. And again, if you eventually get to the go live moment, there could be another transition. How disjointed are those different transitions? What's that journey like? And I'd get a sense of that from the customer references you're speaking to, and try and get an understanding. Are the team of people you're speaking to initially in evaluating the product the same people you're going to be speaking to during the implementation, and the same people that you might be speaking to after you've gone live? what does that feel like, that journey? And do you really feel like that partnership cares about you as a business?
The thing I like about thinking it, I mean, it's obviously managed services and stuff like that's very common, but thinking of it as a partnership, the thing I like is just knowing that there's going to be somebody there if you have a change of guard in the finance team. If the CFO of a business moves on, the CEO knows that there's somebody there behind the scenes who understands their business and how it works, and just having that reassurance that there's someone there that knows how things are set up, how things are working, and can be pulled into action pretty quickly to work. Because a new CFO coming in or a new finance controller might not have experience of it, but they can quickly lean into the partnership support, can't they, to get skilled up and make sure that they've got things covered off, so that there's no drop in service and business as usual.
Yeah, spot on. We've had situations in the past where things change with customers, and we can step in and we can provide NetSuite administrator support or
we've lost him. Yeah, just to sort of carry on, it's there's the support is there to help. the sort of partner side of things, just to make sure that there's continuity and that there's someone who can step in quickly if needed and provide value to help support you as you're upskilling and bringing in new team members or growing the team and that kind of thing. There's always going to be a consistent person in the background who knows how you're working and how things are going. And it's I think with the theme of all partnerships, especially sort of how we work on the finance side of things too, from an accounting and tax perspective, is just to have someone there that you can fall back on if you've got any questions you need to ask that might be helpful for a new person coming on board.
Yeah, I think as well, speaking to Mike previously, there's obviously the initial implementation project, which is a big piece of work, which may take a number of months, but then there's the next 6 months, the next 12 months, and there's the roadmap of how you are going to continue building the functionality over that time, as well as having like the technical support from the team when issues arise and when you need extra bits of training and things like that too. So that's what they're there to provide.
Excellent, fantastic. Well, that's sort of, we covered off the partner side of things and thinking about how sort of to go through the implementation and the needs of the individuals in the team. I think it's really important for us all just to remember that it's obviously a big project, and we all know that. Most of us would have gone through things in terms of bringing on new systems and processes in the past, and it's definitely something to make sure you've got the bandwidth for, and that you've got the team in place to be able to do, and not doing it too early so that it's going to jeopardize or scupper anything else that may be going on in the business when it comes to growth decision making and any of the commercial decisions and inflection points that you're looking to do as a business. So we've had a couple of questions come in so far. If you have got any other questions, please do drop them in. We're going to try to answer as many as possible. So actually going back to what we said right at the top in terms of what are the benefits of an ERP, we've had
we have Mike back here too.
Oh, we've got Mike back. Cool. Yeah, just saying, Mike, we've got a couple of questions coming in now just to sort of jump on top of. So we mentioned earlier about middle ground softwares to be used, implementation, things to think about. Do we jump all the way or do we start to step change? I think we touched on it a little bit, didn't we, earlier, with do you start to move up the order of things in terms of scaling out of Xero potentially and moving up towards a product like NetSuite? There are obviously a bunch of other ones on the market and new ones that will continue to pop up who are trying to fill that gap between Xero and a NetSuite and somewhere in the middle. I guess there is no right or wrong. I guess it really does depend on what the business is looking for and what the needs are of the company, and how much the additional benefits of the environment and the features and the support that NetSuite can provide makes it worth waiting for that bigger jump, or whether there is something in between. I guess it's really a case by case, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is a case by case. I think it depends on the size and shape of the organisation. I haven't found a middle of the road solution really. And I think one of the points that was raised earlier was you really only want to have to do this once. It's actually quite a painful process migrating from one system to another. And why would you want to go through that process for a stopgap middle of the road solution? I don't know. I personally can't buy into that. And people have quite often asked Xero the question, when are you going to introduce Xero Big Boy for that kind of middle of the road solution? People are always asking NetSuite, when are you going to introduce that kind of NetSuite little boy? But if anything, NetSuite's driving itself further up market, but it's creating more standard functionality for people to consume so that they don't have to keep building it during implementation. So that accelerates time to value. When people make a NetSuite purchase, it makes the implementation process that bit simpler. They've tried to standardize with partners the implementation process. We refer to it as this thing called suite success now, which is both the mindset of consuming standard functionality as well as the kind of mindset of keeping the implementation small. Think MVP, minimum viable product. How do we just put the very basic phase, rather than trying to build a Death Star, and we all know that never got finished before it got destroyed. Just implement that standard finance system replacement, keep it as small as you possibly can. And these days, that suite success mindset lends itself really well to then that ongoing managed services approach to the future phases. So rather than having a big bang phase 1, big bang phase 2, big bang phase 3, and everything's kind of delivered in this waterfall fashion, you have a very small
phase one implementation that really just replaces what you've got from a finance point of view. And then you use this agile managed service relationship with that trusted partner to continue to unlock this kind of ongoing chain of evolutions in your business, because your finance team will change. You will open in new territories and markets, and the regulations change, the reporting requirements and what you need from your ERP system continues to change. New technologies come into being, like, you know, open banking, and how do you embed them into your ERP system? So you want to have that continual discussion and dialogue with your ERP partner to unlock all of that value as you scale as an organization. You know, and at some point that startup finance team is going to be eventually replaced, depending on your success and growth, by a, you know, a public, a listed company finance team that has a completely different view of what it needs to get from its ERP system. You know, and that small business needed every change to be tracked, and, you know, didn't need every change to be documented and tracked and audited. And it's, you know, it wanted to keep things agile and cost effective, whereas the bigger business, you know, they're more keen that things are more secure and that things are documented properly. When changes are made in the ERP, things are more structured. So, you know, we have to provide an agile enough service that can accommodate those different situations and those different evolutions of a company.
Definitely. And if people are assessing other options, I think what you said earlier is the right thing to do. I mean, we can't obviously advise or have experience in all of the different products that are out there, but when you're working with someone who's going to implement a particular software like yourselves or someone else, I think iPlicit's mentioned in here, it's speak to them, get references, like ask them to speak to customers that they've worked with and understand what that process was like and the value they've got out of it, and hear from them. Because like you said, if people are prepared to share a reference within a couple of days and speak to a number of people and give them a choice, I mean, it just shows that there's merit in that, and there's people to speak to understand how they've actually themselves personally felt going through the situation. And I'm sure that people will always be happy to share experiences. So I think asking that question and finding out what it's like for other people who have gone through an implementation to product X, Y, or Z is also a good thing to think about.
I think our client base generally are always looking 3 years ahead, to whether that be to the Series C, Series D fundraising rounds or an IPO. And maybe if you were a standard medium-sized business growing 10% a year, maybe it'd be a bit more appropriate to look for something that was a middle ground solution that you would live with for like 4 or 5 years. But typically our clients are going to be growing much faster than that, and yet there's no way you'd want to be doing an implementation 1 year and then another one a year or 2 years later. So I think that's the key thing to think about for our clients.
Just another question here, just thinking about specific benefits or use cases that might trigger someone to move. Some sort of I guess the way to look at that is sort of thinking about frustration points as well and pain points. Some of the stuff that we've seen, Nick, that people have moved on from, or have sort of triggered their need to be thinking about other solutions.
One of the key ones is like SaaS businesses struggling with the billing functionality and recognizing revenue appropriately over the life of contracts. And NetSuite obviously has functionality for doing that, Mike, which wouldn't be available in Xero. So that's always a big one for us. And I guess e-commerce businesses with the stock systems having multiple interlinking systems for inventory management, warehouse management, and accounting is way more complex than trying to get that all under one roof within NetSuite.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you think about the sort of business that NetSuite is, you know, they're delivering software and they're delivering professional services, and they run their entire business on NetSuite. So they're the number one guinea pig, you know, and every upgrade that goes through NetSuite's customer base, it hits NetSuite first. They suffer the pain of any upgrade before we do. But that kind of business needs revenue recognition. It needs that, you know, it needs subscription billing, etc., etc. So all of those, if you need that kind of functionality, NetSuite seems like an obvious choice. I think, going to your point around the product-based business, NetSuite was first and foremost designed, beyond its own requirements as a software firm, for businesses that buy and sell products, so wholesale and distribution, retail type businesses. So it does fit that model extremely well. But it, you know, even then, is it the best product for every situation? Maybe not. You know, there are businesses out there who are able to account in something fairly cheap, and they might want best of breed solutions for warehouse management, or, for demand planning or running MRP or whatever. They might have specific ideas about how they want those bits of software to work. I'd guard against, the thing is, NetSuite's a finance system first, and once you've got the accounting bit right, you can build everything else on top of it. But I would certainly start from an accounting point of view. I wouldn't go into buying a system like NetSuite because I needed good inventory control. I wouldn't go into if I need a good product information management system, I might go out and buy a dedicated best of breed PIM system. But if you're in a situation where, finance is the foundation and you want to build on that foundation, and it makes sense to use NetSuite functionality to do that, then definitely that's the right way to go if you're a product-based business. But if the decision is led by, we need a more tightly integrated Shopify website with our inventory control systems, then is finance part of that discussion, and is the ERP the right place to do that? I think you need to look at that quite carefully.
Yeah, I think it goes back to everybody assessing their own needs and benefits, isn't it? So it's an own needs and benefits analysis, and then speaking to someone like yourself and working out what they could potentially do to bridge that gap with NetSuite if needed. There's one here just about you would have had dozens of these, I'm sure, Mike, but quantifying the benefits of moving to NetSuite over and above, like sort of thinking about cost, but thinking about seeking board approval and pushing forward on a decision like this. I'm sure, with your implementations in the past, there'll have been some stuff that you've had in terms of feedback and responses from clients.
Well, there's so many benefits. Where do I start? I mean, if I can distill it down to maybe a few key ones, future proofing is a really key one. If you want to future-proof a business, and that covers so many different scenarios, right? So it's like a platform for growth. It's about a kind of investing in a tech platform that has a secure future, rather than another acquisition of Sage's or another acquisition of Microsoft's or whatever. When we know what the kind of history of those, NetSuite feels like it's got a really, really secure future. It's continually being upgraded with the kind of latest tech, AI, you name it, kind of embedded into the platform. It can handle multi-country, multi-company scenarios. It consolidates that kind of situation, that international business, so elegantly. That's a really clear benefit. So future-proofing in general, I would say that's a key benefit. And there's so many different aspects to that. Another sort of general benefit is visibility. I've evaluated so many ERP systems, because every time I've considered a career move, I love the ERP space, because I get to have conversations with business owners, with financial leaders, with people in operational roles, technical roles, and I love having that end-to-end business conversation. So I love the ERP space in general. So every time I've changed my career, I've spoken to partners of other ERP systems to make sure that NetSuite still is the leader out there, and every time it still is. And one of its core capabilities is its inherent analytical capabilities baked into the actual platform, not as a bolt-on analytical product like Power BI, but actually within the platform itself, its dashboards, its financial reporting, the ability to customize those, to get reports to be delivered at a certain time and date to people in their email or whatever. That it's got so many analytical components that can be customized actually within the platform itself, not as a bolt-on. The visibility, and it's real time. If you think about it, because it's an ERP, when a product leaves a warehouse, that's being accounted for in real time. When an invoice goes out, it's accounted for in real time. And you can see the GL impact of all of these things in real time in NetSuite. So as a business owner, it's a no-brainer. If I'm a financial leader taking a business case to a business owner, I would say, wouldn't you like to know in real time how we're performing in all of these different regions around the world, and get a consolidated view, be able to drill down into this region or this particular subsidiary, down to this individual person in our organization and how they're performing. It gives you such incredible visibility and insight. So that's another key benefit.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than logging in and finding out that your Shopify link integration's been down for 2 days and you haven't noticed, and it's getting that back up and running again. Everything just happens within platform, doesn't it? And things like deferring revenue, prepaying, accruals, everything is manipulated and controlled within the environment. So you can always see the lay of the land. And from an auditing perspective too, like thinking about going through an audit and the ability to dive into the detail and see all the inception of the transactions all the way through to the journals applied, the backing for all that. Like there's no environment that exists outside of the tool that needs to be looked at there, and it's just thinking about it as a transparent, streamlined, valuable package that's sort of bringing everything together, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And and I guess another thing is, it doesn't have to be all things to all men. If I'm a finance team implementing an ERP system, one mistake that I've seen a lot of finance people make is they start getting so excited about the capability of NetSuite that it could also do HR, that it could also potentially do e-commerce. Actually, there is an argument that, is NetSuite a monolithic ERP system which is a jack of all trades and a master of none? Well, actually, it is a master of finance. It's a master of international financial consolidation, and that's something that you should purchase the product for, including its analytical capability. But try to avoid making decisions for other departments. Don't decide that this is the tool for HR to use. Don't decide this is the tool for your e-commerce or product teams to use. Know that those features are there. Once you've embedded finance in, you can encourage them to review it as well. And maybe in the interim, those modules of functionality that NetSuite has can also fulfill those requirements, whether temporarily or permanently. Who's to say?
Absolutely. Just conscious of time, there's a few other questions coming in. I think for questions that may not have been submitted or have just dropped in, if you haven't had an answer or you want to chat further, we'll do an email around afterwards just to say thank you for joining. And if you've got any specific questions, fire them over and we'll get some responses back to you. Just conscious of time, closing out and everybody getting on with their late lunch or 2 o'clock meetings. But just thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nick. And thank you from me. Thank you from all of us for joining. Hopefully there was a few gems there that will help with your decision making, and good luck everybody with your future endeavours. And we look forward to hopefully speaking to some of you soon. Right, thank you everyone. Enjoy your afternoon.